Mormon here, and I found this video, and it is Daily Pursuit of Truth with Maroun, and he's got Cliffe and Stu, his boy, doing something here, and it's called Cliffe Exposes the Shocking Truth About Joseph Smith. And I said to my son, he knows the internet, and I said, now why do I get these videos about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, of which I am a member? And he said, Ma, it's because of them algorithms. And I said, Al Gore, he was the vice president a long time ago. What's he got to do with some rhythm? I thought the guy was pretty stiff, but I guess if you have invented the internet, you got something on the ball. So I get these things from him, and we're going to talk about this. Here we go. It's a barn burner.
The Apostle Paul or Joseph Smith? Who do we trust? One claimed to spread the gospel, the other claimed to restore it. If Joseph Smith is right, then Christianity has been wrong for 2,000 years. If the Apostle Paul is right, on the other hand, then Mormonism is built on a complete lie. This debate got intense. Let's get right into it.
Now, y'all see how he's setting this up to be all or nothing? He's trying to put all of his pea pods in one basket, and it just doesn't need to work that way. You can have Paul be an apostle, and he taught, and you can have Joseph Smith restoring the truth, because after all, the Bible says there was an apostasy in the middle of this whole thing. And I know there are a lot of you out there saying, oh, Auntie Mormon, that's not true. But I'm going to put those scriptures in there, and you can take a look at them.
Paul wrote a lot of the books of the Bible and stuff, and like we trust him and we trust his word. Like, why do we trust him and not, like, I don't know, I'm thinking of like Joseph Smith, who started with Mormonism, whatever, and he said he had a revelation from God and like started a book and all this stuff. So why do we trust Paul but we don't trust him?
Now, if y'all think that gal is there accidentally asking about Joseph Smith, I got swampland in Florida I'd like to sell you. No, she's there so Cliffe can take this authoritative, manly stance and answer the question, and you're going to notice that she keeps nodding her head like, oh my goodness, yes, I was wrong. And, she's finally getting the whole story. This is total setup, and you can see it on the faces all of these college students watching them. Looks like they had to pay him $10 and offer him some Starbucks or something to stay there.
The reason that I trust Paul to give me accurate information is because the eyewitness community who knew Christ accepted his writings as legitimate. See, so much for me comes back to who's reliable. And the bottom line for me is the evidence, historical in nature, of the way he lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead is Jesus is reliable.
Now, what the heck is Cliffe saying? Is he's trying to say that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does not listen to the Bible? That we don't believe the eyewitnesses because we study the Bible? That's part of our scriptures too.
Now, the way I find out about Jesus is from the eyewitnesses who saw him, who heard him. They wrote what they saw and they heard. Their writings were accepted as legitimate, historically reliable. The Gnostic Gospels were not accepted as historically reliable, and they were not written until the 2nd century. They were not written by eyewitnesses. The Gospel of Thomas was not written by Thomas. Good gracious, it's probably not written until 120, 130, 140. Thomas was not around at that point. He was dead. So his name is attached to a fake gospel that is not historically accurate. The early church knew that, and they rejected it as, no, not reliable. So the reason I accept Paul's writings is because the eyewitnesses of Christ, who knew Christ, who put their faith in him, accepted Paul's writings as legit.
But you know what kills me? He's talking about Thomas, and you can't have the book, the Gospel of Thomas, because it was written too long afterward, and Thomas was dead. So I got to ask you, who was around in 325 that could talk about the nature of God? Ever think about that one?
Stuart, what about you? Why do you?
Well, the historicity of it too. Joseph Smith, look at his life and look at, for example, the history of what happened in upstate New York, where a lot of Mormonism got off the ground. Look at the plates created, these golden plates, the magical underwear. I mean, I could have created plates in my garage, right? Spray painted them.
Now, my mama said don't say stupid, but I think it applies here just fine. Does Stuart seriously think there's a Home Depot store in Palmyra in 1829 where Joseph Smith could go get spray paint? For crying out loud, Stu, put on your thinking cap. And then, Stu, you're just downright rude. You better open to Genesis 3:21 if you want to joke about magic underwear, because that's exactly what Adam and Eve got. After they ate the fruit, they were helpless. That's what that word means in Hebrew, not just naked. You see, they'd sinned and they had nothing to cover it up. Now, they tried the fig leaves, that didn't work. So Jehovah himself came down and he took skins of an animal. Now, that means an animal had to die. He took those skins and he made garments for Adam and Eve and clothed them in it. See, that's symbolic of the atonement. So let's be thinking here deeply about the things that Jesus Christ has revealed to us in the scriptures.
What Jesus pulled off and what Paul started teaching from Jesus is obviously the eyewitness piece and talking to other eyewitnesses that took over thousands based off of the early church and what they encountered that took over the Roman Empire. That is way stronger historically than if you look into Mormonism and what happened in upstate New York.
Now, this part has me totally confused. He's talking about eyewitnesses, and then he branches off into the whole thing about what took over the Roman Empire. They weren't eyewitnesses. And I think he's not able to say this word. It's the C word. You see, Cliffe talks about in kind of a mean way, so Stu can't say it went through the church. See, that isn't going to fly with an evangelical Protestant. That puts him in a little bit of a bind here.
Secondly, archaeologically speaking, those sites in upstate New York are fantasy. Many of them haven't even existed. Archaeologically, what you have there in the New Testament and where Paul is specifically, you have over 84, it's around 84 different facts historically of places that existed just within the book of Acts alone. So you have places like towns like Bethany. Galilee, I believe, was known, but you have Bethesda. These are towns that have historically been shown now to exist. It was only out of the Pauline letters, for example, and the gospel that have shown these towns actually exist. No other ancient document has shown that so many of these different towns actually exist. So archaeologically, the difference is so grand, it's scary. So archaeologically and historical verified.
Now, Cliffe and Stu can tell themselves that what happened in New York was fantasy and that they got 84 cities, but that don't matter because you can't prove anything took place there. Okay, and they're using that argument against the fact that there were gold plates up there in New York that Joseph Smith got. Okay, so let's take a look. There were 11 witnesses. 8 of them said they saw the plates, they touched them, they held them, they turned the pages, they examined the engravings, and they testified all the time that what they saw was real. And then you had the 3 witnesses, Oliver Cowdery, Martin Harris, and David Whitmer, all said they saw an angel, and they never changed that, even after they left the church. And you know what? David Whitmer never came back. Now, he's got a real interesting story. He was a Methodist, and yet he was interviewed time and time again. Well, David Whitmer, you going to tell us about the Book of Mormon? And he'd say, yep, it was real. And he got older, and this man came and interviewed him. And then when it came out in the newspaper, lo and behold, this man said that David Whitmer had denied his testimony, and David Whitmer was madder than a wet hen. So David Whitmer wrote a proclamation and he published it in the newspaper. And he said, okay, now this man is going to know for sure that I said that I saw the angel and I saw the plates. And that is exactly what he said, even out right to his dying day. It's on his headstone that the Bible and the Book of Mormon are one, and that truth will prevail.
Next would be, who is Paul? Who is Joseph Smith? The character. Joseph Smith, talk about the amount of women he slept with. Talk about the sexism that goes on, sadly, in Mormonism today. It's only men can own their own planet. It's definitely not women.
You know, when you point a finger 3 point back, it was Paul that said women should be quiet in the church. So, Stu, you better make sure you don't have any women speaking up in your church if Paul is the man. Now, all this business about women sleeping with Joseph Smith, you show me a single first-hand account that says they consummated the marriage. There's nothing out there except for a couple of women who said that they were his wife in very deed, whatever that means. And yet, Stu is pulling this out of some magic pumpkin. And then he goes off like this is doctrine about getting the planet. This isn't doctrine. It's just somebody writing in a journal and speculating. And Stu, if you're not a Mormon and you want a planet, well, you're out of luck because you ain't going to get one.
What did Paul teach? What was his character? Specifically, though, when he got knocked off that horse in his encounter with Christ, historically, in the Gospels and outside of the Gospels, arguably he was going to be the most well-known rabbi in history, especially at that time, and yet he switches and becomes a Christian because of this encounter. And you have James, the half-brother of Jesus, as well. So he was the head of the Sanhedrin at one point. And what happens? These radical life changes where they go from Jews, who were more so Pharisees and heads of the Sanhedrin and huge synagogues and had all this influence, to all of a sudden saying, you know what? I peed in the same toilet growing up as my half-brother, and I made fun of him all the time, and we get his family even made fun of him in his claims.
By the way, Stu, if you want to talk about peeing in the same toilet and Jesus Christ in the same sentence, I hope your mama washes your mouth out, because that's disgusting.
All the time, and then all of a sudden, I'm going to die for believing that my brother rose from the dead. And Paul very similarly, right? He gave up everything. He was considered a complete joke. He went from the top of the world in Jewish rabbinical studies, right? And leadership, to literally dirt for what he said he encountered with the resurrected Christ. Totally different from Joseph Smith.
Okay, so now you've got this idea that Paul went through all this horrible stuff and Joseph Smith didn't? Come on, they went through the same kinds of things. Joseph Smith lost babies. Paul didn't do that. You had Paul, who was put in prison, so was Joseph Smith, and a lot of them were trumped up charges. He was treated like dirt, just like Paul. And he says that's totally different from Joseph Smith. Well, baloney. And I don't care how high Paul was in the Sanhedrin or his half brother, Jesus' half brother, because it don't matter. When the Lord calls you to the work, he doesn't care if you're the lowliest of the low or the highest of the high. He's going to use what you got. You know, now, I don't know if y'all noticed this, but I think Stu's got algorithms. Watch this. Well, thank you for listening. That's all I got to say about that, pretty much, except I hope you all have a good day. And I hate seeing all this stuff about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because it's stirring up a bunch of hatred, and all this blind bias is making more blind bias. And that's not good. And that's not how the Lord wants us to live. So let's go serve one another, stand by somebody who's different, and get to know them. That's how we're going to cause a lot of good in the world. Anyway, y'all, thanks. God bless you. Bye.